In your aircraft, everything was internal carriage, best I could tell, all of it inside the bomb bay doors. But everything in the F4 is external. So we check to make sure there's no hydraulic leaks, no fuel leaks, no ordnance turned sideways, anything that has fuses aren't turning. The F4 burns a lot of fuel, and we mostly refueled just about every mission that we went, particularly north into North Vietnam. A little story about this slide here in these airplanes. This is Lieutenant Locher on his very first ever air refueling sortie in F4 training school. We're near Flagstaff, Arizona. The airplane that I am was cut up for scrap in the 1980s. The aircraft between me and the tanker is on a pedestal in a regional airport north of St. Louis, Missouri, on the Illinois side, the Falco, if anybody's familiar with that. The airplane refueling is on a pedestal in an airport near Fort Worth, Texas, and the F4 at the far side is in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Portland, Oregon. The tanker, beloved tanker, was delivered to the Air Force in December of 1963. This picture is taken in 1970. In the 1990s, the tanker got new aircraft skin and got new engines, and it's on duty today at the Air Base in Wichita, Kansas. So the story for what I talk to fighter pilots is fighters come and go, but tankers hang around forever. This is another example of a different type of a load that's still an air-to-air load for the F4. Now the F4 can do air-to-ground and also air-to-air. Those long white things are radar-guided missiles, and there's two of them on there, heat-seeking missiles, a different type with the orange tails. That was called Falcon. That was not a very good missile. And then the other positions had electronic countermeasures pods on them. A quick refresher, this is a map of Southeast Asia, particularly the northern portion. Where the two blue circles are. The left one is the air base that I was stationed in Thailand called Yunghans. The right blue oval is where the rescue forces are located. The red circle is Hanoi, which is in North Vietnam, the capital of North Vietnam. Well, it's Vietnam now. And then the white circle is my camping area north of Hanoi. The distance between Yunghans, that left blue circle, and Hanoi is about the same distance as between here and Des Moines, Iowa. So that'll give you a clue. It's 200 some nautical miles between the two. And I'll be getting back to the slide again. What I want to build up to is the terrain that I'm going to do my camping trip in. This particular picture is taken, it's on the western side of southwestern side of the demilitarized zone between North and South Vietnam. So we're on the Vietnam side. You can see the high terrain, the high mountains, limestone, karst type mountains with pretty good sized trees. And then down towards the bottom, you see where they had farmed it, where they skinned down the trees to try to grow something for a while, and then they gave up, and you get a lot of secondary growth. The reason I'm showing you that is that to give you an idea of how I started out on the ground. Now this is kind of a washed out picture, but getting ahead of myself, this picture is taken from the backup helicopter during my rescue. And this mountain that you see in the distance looks almost like the one in the DMZ earlier, is my mountain. This is looking east. This is about 45 miles northwest of Hanoi. I went down on the east slope of that large mountain. I'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. That's where I entered North Vietnam without a visa. Down at the bottom there, you see a different color. That's where the streams were, and that's where it was flat, and that's where they had rice paddies, and also where they had villages and population. This is a closer up view of the rice paddies. You probably can't see it that good, but they've got trails and roads down along near the drainage, and then they have a lot of buildings and villages along there. And this particular slide was taken from an F4 going west. This is looking southeast. This is the Yen Bay MiG base, northwest of Hanoi. You can see the main runway, the parallel taxiway, and then they have a dispersal taxiway. But that river running southeast on the right side is the Red River. And I'll be talking more about that. It's one of my goals where I was trying to reach in order to be rescued. As you can see, there's a lot of flats. There's also a railroad you can't see in there, a highway hiding in the bushes, and there's a lot of people. Okay, back to my predicament. On the 10th of May, we've been escalating the war in North Vietnam for about 3 or 4 days. On the 8th is when the Navy mined Haiphong Harbor. I was in a flight whose job it was is to keep MiG aircraft or fighter aircraft off of our bombers. And on that particular day, our bombers were coming out of Yunghans, which is down below the right-hand blue oval, down 200 miles to the south. They had a 32 ship formation of F4s with laser-guided bombs. Laser-guided bombs are fairly new in the business then. But to show how archaic it was in the early days of laser-guided bombs, to designate, to put the laser spot on the ground for the bombs to guide on, the designating airplane had something kind of like a box camera that was on the left side of the back seater. And what they did then is do a 30-degree bank turn around the target area for the time of fall for people coming in and chunking their 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs. The target for the day was the Paul Doomer Bridge in the northeast side of Hanoi and other military targets in the Hanoi area. So our job, our force ship, was to go to the north of Hanoi and to tangle with any MiGs to keep them off of this gaggle that was putting the bombs down on the target in Hanoi. We went to the north of Udorn, refueled, and then the time on target was 10 o'clock in the morning, local time. And we cruised up to about just to the west of that red ring, up to Hanoi. We were 15 minutes in front of the bombing crew, the flight that was coming in. We had another four-ship flight right behind us, 10 minutes. And there's another four-ship 10 minutes behind that. So us 12, we're going to take on anybody and everybody. That was our job. I mentioned Yen Bay that had that airfield you saw in the picture. Their air order battle was about 40 MiG-19s. The big MiG-21, which is a newer MiG, their base is just north of Hanoi. And if you're flying to Hanoi nowadays, that's the airfield you land with in a commercial airliner. But they had about 60 MiG-21s there, and then there's another set of MiGs to the northeast. But our job is to take on anybody and everybody that comes in. We got off the tanker, headed north. I could tell we already had, the enemy had 4 airplanes, 4 flights already airborne up towards the Chinese border. And then they turned them back around south, and we were waiting then to take them on. We were probably 400 or 500 feet above the ground, staying below the lethal envelope of the surface air missile sites in the Hanoi area, because they couldn't shoot down that low until engagement was imminent. The North Vietnamese then committed their fighters down to the south, and we did what was essentially a fly-up, coming up off the deck. As a flight leader, we only went to 2 stages of afterburner to give 2 more to your wingman. So we were probably 590 to 600 knots. As we pulled up, at about 20 miles to go on contact, we have identified as hostile with a radar missile being fired ahead of you. And at about 12 miles, me and my front seater were the lead aircraft committed to an AIM-7. We climbed out above the canopy bow, and when it was a rocket motor going at a long white contrail, and then the rocket motor burned out, and the warhead functioned. So it was a malfunction. So we committed a second 87, again climbing down. Of course, we're closing more than 1,000 knots closure. So things are happening pretty fast. We got a wingman off the right wing about a quarter mile. Number 3 and 4 off about a mile and a half. And we're taking on the lead element, the lead flight. We commit the second one, the second missile motor burns out, goes for a bit, and then there's a huge red-orange fireball. For those of you that have seen aircraft go down, red-orange equals fuel. So you know that, my gosh, we got this guy, even though we can't see him yet. About the same time, our number 2 fires, aim 7, and what seems like a pretty big sized missile that he's shooting is actually a MiG-21 turning into our flight at about 3 miles ahead. And his missile hits the MiG-21 right behind the cockpit, breaks off the cockpit, and the MiG-21's a delta-wing airplane. And it's just spinning down, we're rolling as we climb over the top of it, still taking on the next bunch coming from the north. About that time, from here to the ceiling, here came the aircraft that we just shot down. The guy had already jumped out, the left wing was missing. It looked just like when you cut a model airplane loose from the ceiling on a string. The guy had already ejected. I hear number 3, they're engaged. Several years ago, if you guys were at Westminster, Colorado, you heard Brigadier General Ritchie speak. He was our wingman number 3 that particular day. And I could hear that they were engaged. And then, we talked about one of the guy's stories this afternoon, all once you're surrounded by things in the air. This MiG-21 flew right out in front of us. From here to the back wall. That's how close it was. It was in his jet wash. We're getting rolled up almost all the way over, but not quite, because it's a small airplane. And just taking us up in the climb. But we're too close. We didn't have a gun. This is where I talk to any young fighter pilots, how close is too close to fire a gun. When you shoot something and parts come off in the slipstream, and you run it over as fast as you can. You want to have it hit you in the canopy, you want to have it go down, you want to on the engine. Maybe you don't want to be so close and already gun somebody. So our intent then was that this guy, he couldn't climb, we had more power than he had. He was standing on his afterburner. And he's going to do one of these jobs because he's going to run out of airspeed. We're going to do a high yo-yo on the way down. We're going to blast him with one of these Falcon missiles I showed you that had the orange tails and weren't very good. What actually happened then, because I saw the Yunghans airport go by at 10 o'clock, we're going northeast and climbing. We had shot down a MiG-21, or number 2 shot down a 21, number 3 is getting ready to shoot. And here comes this guy with a gimme. And what seemed like everything happened at the same time, it was lead brake right. And if any of you have ever been waiting to turn left in the car and get rear-ended, that's what it felt like. And from what I could see in the cockpit, this MiG-21 is separating away from us. How can that be? I know he doesn't have that much power to run away from us. There was smoke and fumes in the cockpit, a hard yaw to the right. What actually happened is 3 MiG-19s jumped in, and we got gunned with 30 millimeter at close range. And what I suspect happened is the right engine was exploded because it's a hard yaw to the right, smoke and fumes. This guy's separating away from us. We still hear what's going on the radio. And I mentioned the front seater above Lodge. See if we're going northeast at the time, and our base is back to the southwest. I asked him to see if we can turn around to the southwest. I don't exactly remember what he said. Not too long after that, I says, let's see if we can turn on the autopilot and save some hydraulic fluid and see if we can get out of here. And he says, Raj, you don't understand, we don't have any hydraulics. And that's when I could see the stick moving around, and the aircraft had no relative motion to where the stick command was. Still didn't soak in, we had the big one. So now we're descending down, hard yaw, big fireball out on the wing. It's slipstream back, poof. After a while, the fire was coming inside the back cockpit, and the fire would go all the way inside, attach itself to the canopies, all the way to the gun sight in front. When it slipstream back, poof, and go behind. And again, I still didn't put two and two together that maybe we're not getting out of here. The thing that caught my attention, and then I heard our number three's backseater, our call sign is Oyster. Oyster, the one flight was me. He said, Oyster 3 is a splash. And I knew that they had shot down MiG-21 also. Well, what got my attention was passing, the altimeter in back was passing 8,000 feet above sea level. And I know we're out of control. I think we're out of control now. And we always try to get out at least 5,000 feet or start the ejection sequence at least 5,000 feet to go because you're running out of time. And I mentioned to Bob, I said, Bob, we're passing 8,000 feet, it's getting awful hot back here, I'm gonna have to get out. And I remember he turned to his head and said, well, why don't you eject? And so I reached down, by that time we're under negative G, reached down, get the handle between the leg, pulled, it seemed like an eternity, like nothing's going to happen. And the F4, the canopy has to be gone before the ejection seat can go. About the time I realized I may have to do the manual canopy jettison, I could see the canopy low start to move. And then for several seconds, I could hear, but I couldn't see. So from negative G up the rail, 15G, until I popped underneath the parachute. Turned about like that. Two MiGs went past me. Somebody this afternoon mentioned about when they jumped out of the airplane and all the noise stopped, how quiet it was. I thought the guys were going to come around straight from the parachutes. I did killed two birds with one stone. There's a modification you can pull that dumps the back four panels on the parachute, and it stops the rotation, and then it's more steerable. So I probably had less than a minute in the parachute. Had I had to manually jettison the canopy, had I had to manually cut myself loose from the ejection seat in case it didn't work, and roll over the side like you guys did in World War II, climb up my riser to find the D-ring and pull it, I wouldn't be here talking to you because I wouldn't have had enough time to do it. So everything for my case worked automatically. Then I could see where the airplane was down the hill to the northeast, down like that hill you saw. I must have had something here, I'm not sure. Or maybe time to have it. But anyway, I figured I'm in a hell of a spot. I'm about 45 miles northwest of Hanoi. It sure is great to be out here in the cool air because I'm not getting toasted anymore. But woe is me, I'm out here. And I'm in an area they say they're not going to pick you up. If you get shot down in this area north of Hanoi, you go out west about 90 miles in the high train and the Air Force might pick you up. Or you get out in the Gulf of Tonkin and call up the Navy. So my plan was, before I went down through the trees, was I'm going to go 90 miles by myself, 2 miles a day. Gee, Chris, that's a month and a half. That was my plan as I went down through the trees. So I went down through the trees. By the time I snagged, finally stopped snagging in the trees, my toes just barely touched the ground, but it was a fairly steep hill. And the aircraft had hit probably a half a mile farther down the hill to the northeast. And where I wanted to evade was up the hill and then to the southwest. So I released my parachute from my parachute harness, and the trees pulled the hardware up almost as high as the ceiling. So I was seen in the parachute. Here's my parachute stuck in the trees. I'm about half a mile from the air crash site on the northeast slope. I gotta get out of here. So stuff I didn't want to take with me, I left underneath the canopy, kicked it down the hill in the direction I wanted to think I was going to go, the easy way, and also to see if I could find a crash site. and I made some big steps. It rained the night before. I made some big steps down the hill for about 20 yards where they couldn't miss it. And I jumped off to the southeast, and then I did like a box turn about 50 yards either way, and across to the northwest of the area I wanted them to think I was going, covering my tracks and not making, bending any vegetation or whatever. They had high trees, but there was some low brush about the height of everybody's heads in here. And by the time I get to that 2/3 of that box done, boy, I can't hardly breathe. I got spots in my eyes, sucking air, and I realized it's shock. So fortunately nobody was on me, so I laid down, put my feet higher in my head and sucked air like an old horse for about 10 minutes. Set up, all I could hear is the airplane burning, and all the jet noise was gone. Everybody went home or went somewhere else as quiet as me, and there wasn't hardly any birds, but just me out there. And drank a pint of water. I had 2 pints of water on me. I drank one of those, and then I started heading up the hill to the southwest. I would like to think I was in control of myself for the rest of the time I was on the ground. So on the way up the hill, I dispersed stuff out of my medical kit throughout the different pockets of my flight suit. I had still had a G-suit on, I had a parachute harness still on, and a survival vest. And they teach you to disperse stuff because one of the first things they do in that part of the world after you get captured is they pretty much strip you. And you want to have stuff distributed as far as you can to see if you can maybe have something in captivity. Another thing is, the time to get away from is initially after they get a hold of you before you get into something that's organized, like a village or a militia or someplace like that. Fortunately, by being a little bit slow, of not jumping out of the aircraft right away when we were really mortally wounded, I got up into that high terrain like you saw in those pictures instead of over the rice paddies. Had I gone into the rice paddies, I'd have been a POW for sure if I would have survived because of the population density. So it takes 2 hours to get up the top of the hill, firm my position, get up in a bad spot about 10 miles east of the Yunghans airport. I go down the western side of the ridge line, which is the opposite side of the crash site. And then I started laying down and picking up brush and covering myself up with brush. On the way over to Southeast Asia, us airmen went through jungle survival training in the Philippines. And one of the things they did at the graduation ceremony was they turned you loose, a half-hour head start on the natives. And if you got caught, you surrendered a red dog tag that gave them a 50-pound bag of rice for the village. During that period of time of the graduation exercise, I had a Filipino stand in my I was under a pile of banana leaves and some other trash piles that I was in, or underneath. And I had a Filipino stand on my ankle for about 5 minutes smoking a cigarette, taking a break. And I don't know if I was that good or they didn't need the rice. But that was one of the confidence builders of if they want me, they're going to have to stand on me to get me. So that I covered up as best I could, and it seemed like almost immediately there were adult males behind me. I thought, well, they're tracking me. They might have a dog. Woe is me. You know, I did my very best counter move, and they're just tracking me. Well, they didn't track me. They came up the top of the hill. One guy's giving instructions. There was probably about half a dozen adults, males. I was shut down at 10 o'clock, so it's about noon. So from about noon till just before sundown, they spent that first afternoon stomping up and down between the ridge line behind me down to the crash site, up and down, up and down, up and down, a very steep ridge line. They made what I thought was a very big deal about quitting and going home, so I figured they're going to leave somebody behind and get you to stand up anyway and stretch my legs, and they're going to see you. Well, I didn't move till after dark. And then they didn't leave anybody up here. So before I turned in for the first night, I went about another 100 yards down. And then the next morning, at first light, it was almost like this graduation ceremony in the Philippines all over again. They come up with women and kids, men, fortunately no dogs, and they spent the whole morning up and down from the ridge line down to the crash site to the east. I'm on the other side now by about a half mile down the hill. They take a lunch break, then they go back to work. And then about 2 o'clock or so, the reason I'm saying about is my military issue watch quit when I ejected. The G-forces stuck the second hand, but at least it glowed in the dark. So that afternoon, there's 2 boys that came down on my side. I know, darn it, it's like a training film to show you're going to be found by a young child. Well, they were timed, and after they took a break, they went back with the regular crowd. And then they knocked off to go home, and I had more nerve then to get up before it got dark and move farther down, and I run across some large bamboo trees where I was able then to peel it sideways and make incision and get banana water as the water came from the leaves to the roots for the evening. That was my first psychological upbringing. So what's going to happen now is I'm going eventually, in several days now, I'm going to get away from where they're actively looking for me. I'm in this high terrain like I showed you, and this really rugged terrain, that the only people that were up there were people that were loggers, that were cutting down trees. And all the farming obviously was done down in the rice paddies. And fortunately it was in a very rural area, even though it was close to their capital city, it was out in the sticks. So I get away from them. There's a long story that when I talk to air crews, we go over some of the training things, of the do's and the don'ts, and whenever they tell you to look at your compass, make sure you look at your compass so you don't go in circles and other kinds of things. And in that neck of the woods, black ants are friendly and red ants are not. And there's also a story or two about monitor lizards. They're about the size of alligators, but they didn't carry AK-47s. Time goes by. I'm essentially executing my own point A to point B. I got 90 miles to go. The first several days I was pinned down pretty good. I didn't make good mileage. I'm concerned about not making 2 miles a day. Then people always say, well, what did you eat? All I had on me when I bailed out was 2 big Tootsie Rolls and 2 flasks of water. There were days when it would rain a lot in the evening or at night, and I collected water with the plant leaves. They teach you to drink until it runs out your ears. So I did that. So I had plenty of water. It was kind of the end of the rainy season, but it was too early for anything in the gardens. It was too early for the fruit in the trees. The first 7 days, I really didn't worry about eating because the heat was on. The worst portion was the second week when I closed my eyes and think about a meal like we had tonight. Think about meals they had growing up, Thanksgiving and Christmas with the cousins. And my aunt sent me a big fruit cake for Christmas of '71, and it's made of something now. It's in my barracks refrigerator, which sure tastes good now. I had $38 on me, couldn't buy a hamburger. And I was a little bit reluctant of putting things in my mouth. I guess I really wasn't that hungry yet. There's one story I want to tell before we get on here. I grew up on a farm northwest of here, and we always had a lot of raw potatoes. So farm kid, I can eat raw potatoes. We got taro around here, taro root. By gosh, I bet you those that dig up it look just like a potato. So one afternoon I dug up this big taro root, took it down to the stream, washed it up, took the knife out, cut it up like we do potatoes. Crunch, crunch, swallowed it. Gee, Christmas. Couldn't believe it. Felt like I swallowed fish hooks. And I spit it out, and then my tongue swelled up. I had to put fingers down my throat so I could breathe. And for about 20 minutes, I was salivating like an old mad dog. So I'm never going to do this again. But if there's any food scientists out here in the crowd, the things that you need to do with taro, because the protein substance around the starch molecules look like a cod burger. And then you got to break them down with multiple boilings to make them into mush, and then they're okay to eat. So needless to say, I was very, very goosey about what went in my mouth from there on out. I'm going to lose 30 pounds in these 23 days. There's stories about different survival lessons. I guess we need to resurrect these slides, but see if they could just time it out. Yeah, okay, cool. My belly must have hit it. You notice I hadn't turned any meals down since 1972. On the 1st of June, which would be day 22 now, I got to get there. I'm ahead of myself on the slide. Anyway, they teach you never walk on a trail. People walk on trails. If you want to be found, walk on trails, people will find you. Well, it sure is tough going through the bushes about the height of everybody's head. Everything's snagging on, everything's got thorns. You can't make a lot of noise. So by that time, I found out that the people from the first light in the morning, when the birds start chirping, a little bit later I could hear fires getting started, the pots and pans, and then women and kids, and then conversation, and then finally people to go to work. That took about an hour and a half in the morning for them to get up and get it going. So in that hour and a half time, now this is like about day 13, I'm coming down out of the heights. I'm down into where they had been doing some farming before, but then gave up, and the jungle's growing back. So I'm alongside this trail, not on it, I'm alongside it, and it rained the night before, and I could see there was already some kids that had gone that away, because I see their bare footprints. And then I could hear them behind me. I thought, I got to get off this road. So I run up over this one little hill. I wanted to see the Red River. No, there's more rolling hills. I jumped off to the north side of the lane. Went about 50 yards and laid down and started doing my typical cover up with brush and whatever else, detritus on the jungle floor. And that's when I realized this isn't good, because all the trees are planted in rows. And then I could see, or I could hear these two boys, it's always these two boys coming down westbound, and then about 50 yards in front, I hear going to the north, and then what's probably about 100 yards over here, it's like a switch went on my ear, women and kids, pots and pans and geese. I'd almost evaded into a village, and it's probably about 7 o'clock in the morning. I got to get up and get out of here because I've been so safe for all these days, blah, blah, blah. Nope. Stay put, because once you start moving, you can be seen. So here I am, trapped next to this village as they're just starting their day. As the day went on, there was an adult male that went behind me, and I hear this chop, chop, crash, chop, chop, crash. And I twist my eyeball around, and this guy was probably 50, 100 feet behind me, was cutting down these large bamboo. And he was cutting them down, then it was chop, chop, whittle, whittle, scrape, scrape. He was making containers out of these bamboo sections, smoking a cigarette. Oh my goodness, he's right in the direction I want to go, so hang tight. Well, then they have your noon meal, and then they have your nap. Time is going by so slowly. About 4 in the afternoon, I hear two boys go behind me. I'm laying down, my feet face to the west. I hear these two boys go behind me, and a little bit later I hear noises coming towards the back of my head and either side. And these kids were bringing in water buffalo to their village for the evening. And there's water buffalo going this way, water buffalo going that way. And then there was noise coming direct to the back of my head, and I thought, this is no good. And I hear crunch, snap, and I hear breathing, and I thought, oh, darn it, they're going to walk on me. I'm all hunkered down, laying down with the trash all over me. And I feel something go across my right thigh, and it gets quiet. Well, I said, they got to stand on me to get me. It sure feels like somebody's standing on my thigh. Any psychology majors in here? says, I'm not gonna lift my head up, just look at this kid who's probably standing on the lake, because if I don't see him, he doesn't see me. Whatever it is for psychology people. So I'm laying there tight. What had happened, this one water buffalo had come up, here's a pile of trash. Well, he obviously can smell, hey, there's a human in here, and he didn't really want to go by it. And these two little boys didn't have a big enough stick to keep him moving. And the guy had come close enough, and one kid goes running to the village. I said, this is it, you're going to get Grandpa, and Grandpa's going to come with a shotgun. It must be time now. I'll move her in. Let me back off a little bit. Get Grandpa. Well, they come with a bigger kid. By that time, I hear a lot of whacking, and they weren't screaming, they were yelling. But they're not hitting. What the heck? Finally, I hear the weight went off my leg. I hear a snort. By that time, I can see my eye. I see a butt of water buffalo. First boy, second boy, third boy trips. I thought he tripped on the leg, gets up, keeps moving. What had happened, this water buffalo then had smelled me, wouldn't go past me. He finally got somebody with a bigger stick to get him to move. He was standing on a sapling and went across my leg. And then whenever he left, a half hour later, when I came up for air, I looked down, I had no camouflage from my right thigh, my right boot was sticking out in the breeze. And that was pretty close. Actually, that was the closest they got. Had they been actively looking for me, they probably would have investigated the pile. Had they had any kind of a dog on the loose, he would have found me. But I dodged the bullet. So I waited. Evening came along, they had the meal, the evening meal. They did their singing. And then I thought, well, they sound like they all went to bed, but I've been having pretty good luck so far. Let's just hang on. 10 minutes later, two little boys come out, smoked a cigarette, passing it around, and they went to bed. And about a half hour later, then I ended up getting behind this village and on the ridge line behind this village, up above them, and that's where I was for the last 10 days, out of ideas. The next day, I was up there, I took the day off. Almost got caught. I got to regroup. I got to figure out how I'm going to get the heck out of the country. By golly, I'm still a free man. I'm going to think about nothing tomorrow. And those of you that try to think about nothing and make bad times pass, know that's impossible. So over time, I'm trying to read. It's a matter of time. I'm getting down into where the population is. I'm probably going to get caught, but I've got to give it my best shot. I haven't gone 90 miles. Maybe the best shot I had is I kept my life preserver. That maybe, let's see, if I get in the Red River, and the Red River goes 6 knots, it's 90 nautical miles to the Gulf of Tonkin, 2 nights worth of floating, sound pretty good. So that was probably going to be my only chance to do it. Well, I was shot down the 10th of May. 1st of June is coming up, so I could probably starve to death up here, nobody ever know the difference. But I got to get back to military control. I got to make the best effort to get back. So I'm going to start evading again down the hill on the 1st of June. Well, it rained all night, the 31st of May. I got cold. I shivered most of the night. That was the first time I shivered. Got rained on quite a bit, but this is the first time I shivered. And I overslept. By the time I woke up in the morning, the people were out working down below in the rice paddies. No darn, I got another day up here. Well, about 9 o'clock, I hear this, boom. What the heck was that? Another, boom. And out to the west of that white ring up there, I could tell they were shooting surface to air missiles. So I figured they're probably shooting American airplanes. I had 2 survival radios on me, plenty of spare batteries. I was not going to key the radio to give an enemy direction finding, because I still had this place 90 miles to go, or actually 80 miles by that time. And I needed to do that on my own. But I decided I'm going to listen on the radio, because there's got to be some American airplanes up there. So until I could identify an American airplane, I wasn't going to get on the radio. So after about 5 minutes, I keyed the mic and I said, any U.S. aircraft, if you read Oyster 1 Bravo, come up guard. Guard is the frequency used for rescue. And about within a minute's time, there were 2 flights of F4, Fletch flight, sonic flight. Had me loud and clear. There was some reconnaissance F4s going up the Northwest Railroad from Hanoi to Yen Bay, taking pictures, and they had F4 escorts with them. And that's who was getting fired at by the surface-to-air missile. So I says, this is Oyster 1 Bravo. I've been on the ground for 3 weeks. Just pass the word that I'm okay. And he says, okay, we'll do that. So that's all I wanted to get the word out in case you never hear from me again. I'm probably a possible POW, you never know, but at least I'm not a straightforward MIA all the way. About 10 minutes later, Fletch came back and he says, we passed the word to the Sandys and Jollies, that's the rescue forces, and they're on their way. And that was like sandbags on my shoulders, because I'm still in an area where intelligence told us don't even ask for rescue up here because we lost so many helicopters in 1966 and 67 up here. You get your buns southwest, and you get down to the Navy. Well, I didn't tell them not to come. let me make sure I get the right one. Now we're ready for now we're ready for the A1. The helicopters are escorted by A1s, which are Navy aircraft. I think the motors on those are the size of B-29 motor, but they're the ones that were close support for the helicopters. And in a couple minutes' time, I had two-way communication with Sandy 1. Sandy was the call sign of these guys, whose job it was to locate the survivor before they bring in the helicopter. And one of the questions he asked me right off the bat, because they figured it appears that we heard nothing from this guy for 22 days now, and he's talking like I'm talking to you folks right now. Must be a trap. Well, first thing to hit me up is one of my authenticator questions. We made 4 of them before we went into combat. It's similar to what you use logging on your computer nowadays. And I answered it right. Well, they still weren't convinced. And I still wasn't going to come out and say, yeah, I'm about 5 miles east of Yen Bay Airport. Because I figured to be listened to by the bad guys. So it hemmed and hawed around a bit, and finally got through them. You know, I'm probably east of the river, kind of like a boat. And they mucked around for a little bit, because the worst thing that can happen is surface or search and rescue that pop up out of nowhere with no prior coordination. Those are the worst kind because they never get completed. They're very few successful. Well, anyhow, they're out trying. Down to the south, I hear anti-aircraft open up. 85s and 57 millimeter opening up down the south. They eventually are getting shot at. They have a compass out and says, hey, you know, I'm 015 degrees, 5 miles, second ridge line about a third of the way down. And they says, we got to get out of here. And they took the rescue forces and beat feet out to the west. So then everything went back to normal again. And so as the day goes on, I'm wondering, well, was this a one-shot deal? Anything going to happen? Or at least they know I'm not dead. That afternoon, they sent an F4 up, but they stayed west of the surface-to-air missile threat radius. And I could hear this guy looking for me. He could not hear my voice off my survival radio. He could not hear the beacon from my survival radio that has a longer range. And so I figured that he's more than 40 miles, because 40 nautical miles is about the range of a radio. And I heard him check in with the rescue force that we don't have contact with this guy. So I figured it's tomorrow, something going to happen. Let me back up one back the other to keep this thing working. What's going to happen now? The rescue forces get back. They report in, hey, also the coordination center down in Saigon. This guy sounds like he's pretty strong. Sounds like he's by himself. We might be able to, if we really work hard and get enough forces together, we might be able to get this guy out of here. They made their case to the 7th Air Force Commander, General John Vogt. And General Vogt's concern at that time, we were losing a lot of aircraft in February, March, April, and May of '72, and we had very low success of getting people picked up, particularly in North Vietnam. And he made a decision that if he can get enough of the rescue forces together for tomorrow morning, the 2nd of June, my 23rd day, we're going to give it a shot to see if we can get this guy out of here. A pitch for anybody that's ever been a maintenance troop. First of all, hats off to those that keep the ejection seats working, and the canopies working, and the parachutes packed the right way, and this, that, and the other. What's going to happen then on the helicopter force is they said we need 3 good helicopters operationally ready tomorrow morning, otherwise it's going to be a no-go. We need 3 to get 2. Well, the 3rd helicopter that evening had gone into a rice paddy about 10 miles west of their airfield, west of that right-hand blue ring, and landed in a rice paddy with the flex drive warning light. If any people have flown helicopters, you probably know what it is. And they put down in the water, and over the course of time, before they got the maintenance troops out, the water came up over the floorboard of the helicopter, which is a floatable helicopter, but still things got wet. So that evening, 2 sets of maintenance troops with lighting units drove 10 miles out to the hinterlands to troubleshoot that helicopter to get it good enough to fly it back onto the base, for the crew chief to dry it out, dry the floorboard out, get everything ready for the morning go. Bottom line is, the morning go took off at 6 o'clock. So I'm up here in my little place saying, this is the day of the day I'm going to get rescued, or is anybody going to come back? And time ticked by, there's nothing going on. Nobody's on the radio. People are doing everything normal. And then about 9 o'clock, I think I hear some jets. I know I hear some jets. And I was about 5 miles east of the NB airport, and through probably about 4/8 coverage clouds, or 4/10 coverage clouds. 4 F-4s came down, dropped ordnance on the south end of the airfield. Another 4 ship went through and dropped ordnance on the north end of the airfield. Another 4 ship came through a hole in the cloud and went to the east of me. So in about a minute's time, there were 12 F-4s on the top of me. And about a minute later, Sandy 1, the A1 guy, is on the radio looking for Oyster 1 Bravo to come up guard. And I did, two-way communication. He says, Oyster, he says, I got a little question for you, you better answer it right. Or to me, it was no big deal because I know what the other 3 questions are and the answers. Well, they considered everything compromised the first day. So they went to the squadron and the intelligence section at Wing to say, does anybody have any dirt on this Locher guy? Any questions that there's only he'll know the answer to? Well, they came up with another set. So anyhow, when Sandy says, I have a little question for you, you better answer it right. I said, shoot. He says, what's kites? Well, that's not one of my questions. But I knew what the answer was. I says, kites? He says, yeah, kites. What's kites? Well, anybody that's been to Kansas State knows the beer joint in Aggie. And I said, it's a place to drink beer, man. And back in the 70s, we said man a lot. And what seemed like forever, drink what? Beer! Seemed like forever. You sound like the one I want. I said, you're damn right I'm the one you want. So according to the helicopter and the A1 guys, okay, this guy doesn't have a gun to his head, he's not a trap, we'll proceed. Well, proceeding was still tough. What seemed like forever, there was sonic booms going on. I did see some MiGs flying around, but the airstrike was over with. And I was more forthcoming in my position. And they were more forthcoming that they, we looked about every ridge line east of the river. You haven't seen us, you haven't heard us. And I said, Sandy, you remember you got shot at yesterday? Yeah. If you go back to that place, I can see it from here and I'll vector you in. He says, thanks a lot, buddy. But eventually that's what they attempted to do, is go back that area. And then I saw him to the south of me about 4 or 5 miles, headed back west. He says, Sandy, I'm 5 miles north of you. And he says, okay, be quiet. You tell the survivor to be quiet when you do it. Anyhow, they were getting fired at by this anti-aircraft stuff down in the south, and they put in flak suppression flight with cluster bombs and what have you, and they had white smoke, black smoke, ammunition smoke going to the moon. I said, okay, Sandy, I'm 015 for 5, second ridge line, third of the way down. I said, okay, have all your stuff ready, we'll be back. Then they went out, they had the helicopters west of the river, kind of in the area where I was trying to evade, and then they went and picked them up. So I'm sitting overlooking my empire to the southwest towards the airfield. There had been an airstrike that went on, and these people are down below working in the rice paddies. There's still sonic booms and what have you going on, and jet noise. And finally, I think I hear an airplane. Yeah, I know I hear an airplane. And from the backside came the first A1, and then 2 and 3 came by, and when 4 came by, now I'm looking southwest here. The sun's over here in the east. The A1's over here, and I hit in the eye with the signal mirror. Tally ho! And they start a hard turnaround, defensive turn. And then Sandy once says, "Oyster, you're not going to believe this. I got a Jolly Green Island Trail, hold your beacon down." That was for the course guides. This is the point I bring up when I talk to military people about the law of armed conflict. I had a sidearm on me. At what point would I have been a dangerous man? That's the point. I would have been a dangerous man. We all got to watch the training flick where this 105 guy is shot down, and right at the tail end, here comes this 4-year-old girl spreading the bushes out and finds him. So the thing I always say, right before that 4-year-old girl screams her lungs out, what are you going to do? So that always goes over kind of good with high school kids, and I tell them, did you kill her? Is usually what they said. No, it didn't happen to me. But it's something to consider, that up until that point, rescue was not imminent. You don't go taking on civilians without getting the consequences. And even still, I don't know what I would have done. Probably would have shot, but you never know. So anyhow, I hear the helicopter coming, came right over the top of me as fast as he could go, which is about 120 knots. It says, just passed over the top of me, did a hard turn to the left, and I hit the co-pilot in the eye with a mirror. Tally ho, they came down, and then they lowered a jungle penetrator, which is on a cable. And they tell you got to let the penetrator hit the ground for the static electricity discharge and knock you on your butt. So I waited for it to hit the ground. I got hooked on it, gave them a thumbs up. They pulled me up off the ground and started taking off. Fortunately, didn't pull me through the tops of the trees like they have done other people in the days gone by. And they reeled me in. And they teach you to never, ever, ever, ever help a parajumper guy get unhooked from the jungle penetrator, because we've had people that had fallen off. They got in a hurry to help and they fall into the ground. So I'm hanging on. They have to reel you up to the end and play out the thing, and this huge parajumper guy threw me down on the floor, ripped the jungle penetrator out of my hands, and the helicopter's taking off, moving, rolling back and forth. And I struggle to get to my feet, and when I'm doing that, another enlisted guy puts this big coffee can in my bosom, and it's full of cookies. And it was somebody's care package from home. So I'm just getting to the litter and sitting there, I'm stuffing cookies in my mouth. I'm stuffing cookies into my, the radio pouches in my survival kit. Because I figured I got shot down once with nothing to eat, I'm not going down twice with nothing to eat. But you cannot stand up underneath the rotor wash of these airplanes. So there's the kid, about 10 minutes after he's picked up, sitting in the back of the helicopter, with a parachute on, giving a thumbs up as if he knows what he's doing. Now some of you old gunners recognize the gun sight over there on the left side at the bottom. They had 3 miniguns on the airplane, left door, right door, and then one on the ramp in the back. So I'm feeling pretty cocky with them. And after a while, I realized, hey, we're going northwest. My home base is southwest. And he says, yeah, no, but we got to get out of this surface here in this terrain before we cross the Red River. So, somewhere along the line, it's going to take an hour and a half to get out of North Vietnam. Somewhere in that first half hour, the flight engineer says, hey, boss, he says to the aircraft commander, we don't have enough fuel to get home. If we're lucky, we got enough fuel to get in one of the Lima sites up in northern Laos. If we're lucky, we'll find one that belongs to us, and also we'll find good fuel and 55-gallon drums to pump enough by hand to get home. He says, come on, we got to get this rendezvous. Anyhow, on the far aircraft is an HC-130 that has two drogues, two hoses that come out that have a drogue connector to them for refueling the helicopters that have a big long probe that sticks out. And that helicopter that's closest there, I'm in that one. And then this picture here is taken from the backup helicopter. So anyhow, it takes an hour and a half to get out of North Vietnam, an hour and a half to get out all the way home, so it's 3 hours home. That's us on the ramp right as the maintenance guys putting the pins in for the jettison tanks before we shut down. And there's the scurvy kid where the 7th Air Force War stopped for the morning go to get my little butt out of North Vietnam. And that's the guy that said, put his career on the line, the 4-star general that runs 7th Air Force, to commit the resources to try to get me out. And the reason why the captain's grabbing the 4-star general by the cuff, really no excuse, except I couldn't really stand up. And number 2, there were 2 external power unit electrical cords there I was stumbling on, trying to trip on like extension cords. So anyhow, that's the general vote. I had so many tears in my eyes, I didn't know who he was, because we had a new commander about 2 months before, and in those days, 4-star generals didn't wear name tags. But he had my squadron's hat, had 4 stars on it. Here's my heroes, my number 1 set of heroes. This is the helicopter crew that picked me up. The guy on the right in the back standing up is Dale Stovall, the aircraft commander. The guy second from the left standing up is the co-pilot. The big moose there on the left side is the PJ that threw me to the ground, or to the floor. The kid down at the bottom with the bray on was the other parajumper. The kid down at the bottom with the pencils was the flight engineer complaining he didn't have enough fuel to get home. And the other guy in camis there in the middle was one of the gunners. And the kid in the t-shirt was the crew chief at NKP who was so glad to see his airplane come home with no bullet holes in it. So that's my number 1 hero. Jolly 30 is their call sign. Here's the 4 A1 drivers. The one on the right, Ron Smith, is the one who asked me all the questions and led. The number 2 guy is the lieutenant. Number 3 guy with a cold towel around his neck is Jim Harding. And then number 4 is Bill Latham. He has since passed away. But those are the A1 guys. I don't know if any of you old boys there recognize the pure steel planking they're walking on at A1, with underneath the A1, but it probably came from Toretta. Came from somewhere. Here's the backup crew. Jolly Green 60 obviously had another day to get cleaned up and get the parade ready. But the aircraft commander, the co-pilot, and then the 2 parajumpers, flight engineer, and then the guy with the camera there is the one who was taking those pictures that I showed that were the yellowish tint to them. They were the ones that would have come in and stepped right in had Jolly 30 got shot down. They would come in and gave it their best too. So my hat's off to all those folks. And there's the result. And I finally got done shaking hands and whatever. Somebody gave me a Coors beer that almost knocked me on my rear end. But I get the police up to go see the flight surgeon. And I'd shaved twice when I was on the ground, so this is only about a 10-day job here. But shaving with a little surgical knife out of the medical kit is a good way to inflict more damage on your cheeks than you do. So I guess that's the story. If you want to, I guess we'll go to number one, just leave it, let time out. So that's my story. If it wouldn't be for the people that went out of their road, put their life on the line, and if only one other thing would have changed in the war, that I would have been taken POW. I probably should have been about a 10-month POW. But these people went out, put their life on their line, they did their job, and I'm the recipient of being spared the imprisonment war. So there's what happened to my front seater is, I'm not sure if he got out of the airplane or not. I know that 5 years later, in 1977, when President Carter sent a person as an emissary to North Vietnam, he came out of North Vietnam with the remains of 11 airmen, in which my front seater was one of those sets identified, class of 64, the Air Force kept. So there's times when you got to go out and do things. When they say go out and don't let any MiGs get into the strike package, well, we did that, but it was at a cost. Our flight got 3 MiGs. We were shut down. There was another flight behind us that had their number 4 man shut down, and they were fatalities. So nothing's free. But fortunately, we have a nation of folks that go out and put their life in harm's way for their country. There's a bunch of them in here tonight. Thank you for your service for that. One little get off the stage here. In our neck of the woods in northeast Kansas, about 3 or 4 counties, in World War II, we had 23 folks that were casualties that were in the B-24 system. 20 were KIA, and 3 of them were POWs, and those 3 were liberated. Most of those were just before, I think, a lot of you guys showed up, but still shot down a lot by German fighter aircraft, some with flak, and a heck of a lot of either engine problems or whatever else you really can't put your finger on. But I still think of how you guys did it. How in the heck did you guys do it? At what, 240 knots was your delivery speed? Anybody remember what it was for a B-24? 4 miles a minute? I'm just thinking out loud that I don't know if you have any navigators in here. That's an eternity to go by at least a AAA battery, let alone a bunch of fighters that are full of 20 millimeter and whatever else. But anyhow, my hat's off to you. And it is a kindred spirit here, which I bring my story, and thank you very much.